In Mamorim Malukot, this is in Chelik Aleph, the 39th Mamer. The Mamer is Vayihyu Chayei Sara Meyashoni V'Esrim Shana. The Rebbe said this Mamer an Liom Hey Parshas Chayei Sara, and this was Chof Marcheshon, and that is Yom Haledes Kvet Kedushas Admur Marashab Nishmos Eden in Hey Tovshim Aleph. In Tovshim Aleph, on the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab, Chof Marcheshon, in the note it says that this was published in the booklet Chof Cheshvan Tovshim Mem Ches, in honor of Chof Marcheshon that is going to Bo'alein L'Tova, coming upon us for the good, the day of the Rebbe Rashab, and is signed the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab. It is dated at Motzei Shabbos Kodesh Tezvav Marcheshvan Shnas Hakel Shnas Tismach, and Tov Mem Ches was this published. This is, we'll see in the Maimer, this is 120 years that the Rebbe said the Maimer. The Rebbe Rashab was born in Tov Reish Chof Aleph, and this is Tov Shin Mem Aleph. In the Maimer, the Rebbe will actually also be discussing, and towards the end of the Maimer, the 120 years of Moshe Rabbeinu, and generally the Maimer discusses the meaning of the pasuk of Vayihyu Chayei Sara and Shnei Chayei Sara. The duplication seems to duplicate again, and he quotes from the Zohar that the years of were Hamshocha from the Spheres, and Snei Chayei Sara is even that the Chaim was the law, as the Zohar, as we'll go step by step, we'll see in the Maimer a lot of very interesting details. It's interesting that in a few years later in Tavshim Mem Hey, exactly, the Rebbe also has the same on the Yom Haledes of the Rebbe Rashab, and that was published in Tavshin Nun Aleph, which was 130 years from the birthday. That's the next Maimer in the series of these Maimorim. In Mamorim Meluka, this comes the next one. It will be the 40th Maimer. So this is, and the Rebbe also bases himself on the Maimer of the Rebbe Rashab from Ateres, Tafresh Ayin Tes, and it articulates it's very similar to this. Okay, so without further delay, let's go inside. Psiyaita Dishmaya, Liom Hey Parshas Chayei Sara Chof Marcheshvan Yom Haledes Kvet Kedusha Ad Marashab Nishmos Eden Hey Tovshim Mem Vayihyu Chayei Sara Meyashona V'Esrim Shona V'Sheva Shonim Shnei Chayei Sara. So the opening of the pasuk of the parsha is that Sarah's life was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, 127 years. That was the life of Sarah. So the Rebbe Rashab is Medayik, points out, in the Maimer that opens up with this opening of Vayihyu Chayei Sara of the year of Ateres. And he asks over there the question, Mahu Oimrei Shnei Chayei Sara. What is it that the pasuk concludes by saying this is the years of Sarah's life? Harei Kvar Nemar, but it already said in the beginning of the pasuk Vayihyu Chayei Sara, and the life of Sarah war. Umefaret Shnoiseho, and it details the years. The life of Sarah was B'meyos, how many was in hundreds? It was 100 years. Asirios, and how many in 20s? And V'achodos, and the ones, the 7. So he says already, life was 127 years. V'loma kofal oid loimar shnei chayei sara. So why does he repeat again? He duplicates to say shnei chayei sara. As the Rebbe will explain that it means, according to the Zohar, that it means the second posuk Shnei Chayei Sara means that the years were actually her years. You can live Chayei Sara, you can get the Hamshoche, or the Rebbe talks about Sfiras HaMalchus, you can get, it should be Chayei Sara, but you can get, these were Shnei Chayei Sara, as the Zohar says, the Lohin, as we'll see later on. V'gam tzorich lahavin, also we have to understand, K'mesh Medayik b'Zohar, as the Zohar questions, amongst the four foremothers between Sora, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, the only one that the Torah quotes how many years she lived was only by Sora. But Sora Dafke Nemar Yimei Shnei Chayeho, the Torah tells you how long she lived. We don't find the years that the other Imohis lived. Why epis by Sora was it was the pasuk chosen? The Gemara, the Zohar explains also that Sarah had a different experience. She had to go down to Mitzrayim, and she went up from Mitzrayim, Nochtas V'Solkas. She had a unique experience, and therefore she was merited, as the Rebbe will continue. Now, it's not only that the Torah gives us the number of how long she lived, but the Torah actually calls the whole parsha, Ba'ad Shekol HaParsha, the entire portion of Chayei Sara, Nikras Al Shem Zeh, is called on that idea that because her age, how much she lived, we gave a whole parsha based on that, on her life, and we call it Chayei Sara. Shebezeh mashma, since we call the name of the parsha, we call it Chayei Sara, shezehu toichin kol hasedra, that this is the content, the idea of the entire sedra. So here we have a whole sedra giving you and talking about the Chayei Sara, about the life of Sara, the age of Sara, Sara's life, and we don't find at all mentioned about how the other Imois, how long they lived. Shaloi Nemar Zeh B'Sharei Imois. That has not been said by the other mothers. Maybe was a Mamer HaZohar, so the Rebbe Rasha brings down the saying of the Zohar. It says that Osos Chalvo La'almo V'yizdapkes B'chavio. Once Chava came down to the world, then what connected? She connected to the snake, so there was a failure from the first woman, from Chava, that she connected to the snake. Following her, also Noach la'almo. Noach came to the world. There was again a failure. Maksiv Bey, what is it written by him? Vayesh min hayayin vayishkor. He drank from the wine and he got drunk. Also Sora, but Sora came, v'nochtas, and she had descended into Mitzrayim, v'solkas, and she went up. V'loi is dabkas Bey, and nothing connected to her. K'modat Amrit, as the pasuk says, "Vayal Avram miMitzrayim hu v'ishtay." So Avram came up from Mitzrayim, him and his wife. So, notwithstanding that they descended, but they still went up. Ubegin kach zochsa l'chayin nilamin, and because of this, Sarah merited this supreme life. Viehyu Chayei Sara, the Chayei Sara is chayin nilamin. She's because the others, Chava and Noach. Chava, it's also brought down, as the Rebbe will explain, that she gave a cup of wine to Adam, and he failed. Noach gave the planted these, took along the plantings, and he made the kerem, and he drank, he got shikr, he failed. But Sarah, and the Rebbe will explain, this is whole idea of simcha of Hashem, and if there is a proper simcha, then it's like Sarah, it can bring down high madregas. But if this simcha is with yeshus, as the Rebbe will explain, so then there's negative that comes out. The chava is dapkus bechavya. By Noach, it's vayishkol. But Sarah, because she descended and she went up properly, so therefore, begin kach zochso l'chayin eloin. That means Vayu Shnei Chayei Sara. Only Sara had that experience, and only she had that merit. That's why she's the one person. U'Mesayim b'Zoyar Shom, and the Zoyar concludes Valdo di lo hava chayim, and for this hers was life. The life became hers, was the law became hers. So that's the second time that the pasuk duplicates. The first says Vayihyu Chayei Sara, that she was mamshich chayin Elohim, and Shnei Chayei Sara, the pasuk duplicates is the law havichayin, that it became so. Based on this, the Rebbe Rashab explains in the above Mamer Shnei Diyukim Hanal, these two questions that we said before. We asked, first of all, Shadavke B'Sora Nemar Yimei Shnei Chayeho, that it's only by Sarah where the Torah writes the years, how long she lived. We don't find it by the other. Shaloi Nemar Bishar Imois, that was not been said by the other foremothers. Why? So that question is Antliv Shadavke Sarah, because it is specifically Sarah. Al Yidei Shenochasas V'Solkas, because she descended, and then she came up. Vayal, Avram Mitzrayim Hu V'Ishtoi. They went up after their descent. Zochso l'chayin Elohim. She merited this supreme life. Uma shekofal oit pam lemer shnei Chayei Sara. But the fact the pasuk repeats. Second question we asked: why does it say these are the years of Sarah's life? Av shekvar nemar batchila. Viheyu Chayei Sara, even though it already says these were the lives of Sarah were. Hu ki Viheyu Chayei Sara, the first time Humash Zochso l'chayin Elohim. That is, the life was that she merited that supreme life. Ushnei Chayei Sara, the duplication Hu inyan di lo havechayin. That's the idea, that the life was hers. It is not only that she merited the supreme life, that supreme life that she merited became hers, that was hers. So we have to understand what is the meaning that she was zoicha to the chayin Elohim, and then the second step that they become hers, that the law have it, that they become hers. V'gam tzorich lahavin, and also to understand, as the Rebbe will explain, when the chayim become hers, that's a whole nother level. The Rebbe will explain it both according to the Kabbalah, that Sora is the Sfiras HaMalchus, Sora Meloshon Sororo, dominance. And Malchus receives from the Meya V'Esrim V'Sheva, that's Keser, Chochma Bina, and the Sheva Midos, receives from them Chayin Elohim. But then when they become part of Malchus, that reaches a higher Madrege, and actually Malchus is mamshir back into the Sfiras, as we will see. So here, what is the two ideas of, and also in Avodas Hashem, level of Simcha, as we'll see. Also, so we have to understand the contents of these two levels of Hamshacha Chayin Eloyin, and that it becomes her. Begam Tzarich Lahavin, we also need to understand this connection. It seems like Noach and Chava and Sarah, these are all connected. They failed and she succeeded. So, Begam Tzarich Lahavin, the Melosh Nazoyah, also Chava came. Also Noach came. Also Sarah came. Move on. It's understood sheyesh shayches ben gimel inyonim elu, that there is a connection between these three matters. Hainu, the Chava v'Noach rotzu lifel oiso ha'inyan shapol osor. That Chava and Noach wanted to accomplish, effect the same idea that Sarah did accomplish. Elo shelo also biyodem, but they weren't successful. Not only did they not succeed in the elevation, they, by them, that became a descent. Is Dabkas Bechavia, by Chava, she connected to the serpent, to the Nachash, by Yishkar, and by Noach, he became drunk. Mashenkin Sora, as opposed to Sora, even though by her the beginning there was Nachsas, she descended, but then through this descent was later an elevation. Nachtas v'solkas, to descent she went up. Tzarich love and Ashayk is the Gimel in Yonim Elu. What's the connection of these three things? So, what is Noach and Chava and Sarah? What is the three connection that she went to the serpent and that went by Yishkor, and here Nochsos V'Solkus. And the Rebbe wants to explain this really in Avodas Hashem. And the Rebbe again explains that the level of Simcha, sometimes Simcha fails. That's like by Noach and by Chava, because it comes with Yeshus, it comes with holiness, with arrogance, and then that Simcha, the Hispashtus, can bring a person to a level that negative, and that's why by Chava and by Noach it didn't work. Davke, when it comes through the level of Bittul, Nachtas, Visalkas, like by Sarah. So the Rebbe is going to first say now, and Ois Bey is going to bring down that when we learn about what took place by Sarah, the Parsha Vayihyu Chayei Sara, is not just reading something about that happened with someone else in the Torah story, but this is actually a lesson for us. Always Torah is a lesson, but especially when we talk about the forefathers, the mothers of the Jewish people, that we're inheriting their qualities. So therefore, it is very specific. So we have to take a lesson, a message from this in our lives, as the Rebbe will continue. Base. Maisa Ovis Simon Lebanim. What took place by the fathers is a sign for the children, meaning the Jewish people have to take a lesson. Now here, Simon is not just a sign which is directions. So we see what takes to the parents. We have directions. We learn what we have to do. Over here, Simon is an empowering, that what happened to them empowers us to happen about us as well. Yadua, and it's known, Shakavona b'Simen Kanhi, that what is meant over here when we say Simon, Hiloirak Simon v'Hayro, it's not just a sign and a lesson, Elagam nesinas koyach, but also that it is giving us this strength. They did it, they opened up, when they did it, that gives us the strength for us to continue to do along the same line. And this is the idea is sometimes we find Pesach, this one opened up. They started it, they opened up. And once they opened up, that gives the power. This is the idea of Al Derech HaYedua. This is similar to what is known B'inyan Pesach Rab Nichulu. It says always, oh, this rabbi opened up and he said. So what does it mean, opened up? Opened up means he opened up the possibilities for people to follow in that. After opening up that pipeline and that path, sometimes you can just open up a path. Sometimes you can actually tread through that path and make it walkable. Kasher solal esaderech, that he treaded through and made it a walkable place, road. That was through that the power was given to each and every one that he can do, he should be able to do this avodah. And he does not need such a big effort as the first time. The first time, the one who starts it off, he has to make that road. He has to thread it through. He has to go through that. It's hard to begin, but once you begin, it's not as difficult anymore. So this is generally Pesach, when you open up by the forefathers and the foremothers, is even more. Valach as kama v'kama. Shekein hu b'maisov is how much more so that this is true in the happenings of the fathers. Since they're the fathers of each and every one of the Yidden, so their matters and their services extend as an inheritance to each and every one of the Jewish people, inherits from their avodah, what they started off, not only because they started it, which was by everybody, but we inherited their avodah, the strength for this avodah. So it's not just the forefathers, but because here we're talking about Sarah, but the same thing is true with regards to the Imois, and specifically as it pertains to our mother Sarah. Harishoina shel bedala dimois. Sarah was the first of the four mothers, so it's more powerful, the strength we get from Sarah as being the first, especially that the Torah says with regards to Sarah, the pasuk says, "Uksiva." The pasuk says by Sarah, "Kol asher toimer elecha Sarah shma bekoili." Bekoila. The Eibsher says to Abraham, whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her. That means that Sarah has to be listened to, and she's greater in the level of Nevuah. And Rashi says, but generally, the idea that we have to listen to Sarah means that Sarah has an influence and an impact upon all of her children, for us to take the message and the lessons from her life and apply it to our life. So from this we understand the Inyan Hanal, that the above idea that we discussed, that Osos, Sarah, V'nochsos, V'solka, Sarah came and descended and then went up. Hokichol Maisa of his V'imois, so that is as all of the happenings of the fathers and the mothers, Hoiro, it's a lesson. Gam nesinas koyach, and also it gives strength. Bavidose shekol echad echad miYisrael, in the service of each and every one of the Jewish people. וצורך להבין ההירו דנחתס וסלקה בהעבודה דבונים לאחרי מתן תורה. So we need to understand what is the lesson of this descent and the elevation in the service of the children after Matan Torah, which means after we became a people and we have the Torah and we have to follow the Torah. So how do we apply what happened to Sora before Matan Torah in their lives to us after Matan Torah? And the Rebbe is going to explain that we have to serve the Eibishter with Simcha, but Simcha can sometimes deteriorate and lead us to bad things. And that was what Chava and Noach happened to them. And then we have to learn from Sarah how the Simcha needs to be in a proper way, that Simcha needs to be with Bittul, and that's when it leads to receiving all the blessings in a very strong way, and that things shouldn't go wrong. Gimel, Kudush Inyan Bazeh. The point of this idea is as the master of the birthday, which is Chafov, explains in the above Mamer, the Mamer of Ateres, in Tofresh Ein Tes, in this Mamer, the Avodas Havayet Tzricha Liyas Besimcha Davke, that the service of the Eibishter needs to be Davke with joy. K'mei Kosuv. The pasuk says, what does it say? What to do? Serving Hashem. Why? Pasuk says beferish. Ivdus Hashem b'simcha. It doesn't say just serve Hashem, but you have to serve Hashem with joy. But to such an extent is it important to dafke have simcha. Simcha b'avodus Hashem hi ikir gadol. That's a main part. It's a main principle in the service of Hashem is to do it with simcha. As it's known, Kidua, Pirush HaRizal V'huva B'tanya, as it's known, the Arizal's explanation that was brought down in Tanya, the stress, the emphasis on Simcha, because the Pasuk says, Allah Pasuk, Tachas Asher Lo Yavadetas Hashem Alakecha B'simcha V'goymer. The Pasuk says, because you didn't serve Hashem with joy, and there goes up on the pasuk to tell you a lot of negative punishments that take place. So the Arizal points out, it doesn't say that you didn't serve Hashem. It says you didn't serve Hashem b'simcha. That means that's so important, simcha, that if you don't do the mitzvah b'simcha, then there is big problems over there. So you see how important the Arizal says simcha is. That all of the negative things is not for not serving Hashem, but for not serving Hashem b'simcha. And we also find in Torah the Masha HaRizal Zocha L'Ruch HaKodesh. This that the Arizal merited to have Ruch HaKodesh, Hu Alidei Simcha Shel Mitzvah. So you see, because when he did the mitzvah, he did it with Simcha, Ivdas Hashem b'Simcha. That gave him Ruach HaKodesh. So you see how Simcha is important. So one will argue, okay, I'm not looking for Ruach HaKodesh, and I'm not like the Arizal. Why do I need do the Simcha Shel Mitzvah to get Ruach HaKodesh? But since the Torah tells us about it, and since the Torah tells us about it, it means that the Alter Rebbe, that there is a lesson for us. It's not just to tell us something that he was and what he did, but it's something that we should do. Since this is a story in Torah Shabbat Peh about the Arizal, and Torah is Malosh Neira, so if it's a Sipur in Torah, so this is a Heira. This is a lesson. It's in Torah, teaches us a lesson. So this becomes a lesson for each and every year, not only for an Arizal, but for every year. Lesson is the kasher ha'avodah hi b'simcha. When you serve the Eibishter with joy, Oz ha'avoda hi b'shleimus, then the service is complete. It's it's a whole service. It's when it is done with simcha. It's not only important for the person to do the mitzvah fully, but then it has the full impact on the world. Mitzvahs that we do have to impact the world. If we do it fully, then we have a full impact in the world. The kasher that way there's also becomes this completeness wholesome in the world. So what's the connection that because the Yid's Avodah is b'shleimus, this also brings wholesomeness in the world? Because the entire Yid is to serve the Eibishter to make a difference in the world. So if the Yid is complete, the world will become a complete place. The ultimate creation is for Yidden, shenikroim reishis. The Yidden are referred to as reishis. Bereishis is base reishis. The reishis, one of them is the Yid. The Yid is the reishis. So the world was created for a Yid. Opirush b'shvil Yisrael. What does it mean for a Yid? Not just for a Yid independently, but for a Yid and Torah, so that he should serve the Eibishter. Yisrael, the Yisrael. That means what the Yid will work. The Eibishter created the world for a Yid's work that Yid will do. Shazehu Iker Mitziyuso. Because, well, this is not an addition. Oh, we're saying Yid and then his Avodah. The Avodah of the Yid isn't something different than the Yid himself, because the whole Yid, his whole creation is to serve Hashem. So it turns out for the service of Hashem, because Shazehu Iker Mitziyuso. This is when we say for a Yid is Avodah. That's the main thing of the entity of a Yid, is to serve the Eibishter. Mamer Vayihyu Chayei, that the person's whole creation was only in order to serve the Eibishter. So that means that Bereishis for a Yid to serve to Avodah, sheYisrael al Yidei Avidosam Poyalim Sha'olam Yeh B'Tachlis Hashlemis. So the Yid, through his service, impacts the world should be complete. So it's important for the Yid to be b'simcha, so that his avodah would be complete, so the impact on the world will be complete. Now, it seems a little bit difficult. We have to make the world complete, but didn't the Eibishter create the world in such a way that is complete? The world, the Eibishter created a perfect world. What does it mean? But the Eibishter, the Rebbe will explain now, created the world in a way to give a Yid an opportunity to become a partner and fix the world to bring it even to greater shleimus than it is the shleimus, because the Eibishter allows for a Yid to reach the highest level by bringing in shleimus in the world also. The Hagam, the Rebbe continues, Olam al milu'oi nivra, the world was complete, was created, complete, full. Everything that needed for the world was there from Hashem. Ubefrat al pi hayadua, especially based on it's known that the creation of the world comes from the Eibishter's chesed. So when the Eibishter's chesed, there's no limitation. It's complete. It's the ultimate chesed. So why would we have to add more? Prat al pi hayadua shemehatayim al briyas ha'olam hu. that some of the reason why was the world created is it went up in Hashem's will, blessed will. He wants to do good for his creations. Want to create and do good for them. And the nature of somebody who's good is to do good. Since the Eibishter is good, he's doing good with the creation. Move on, so the Eibishter wouldn't give a little bit. So if he's good and he's lahativ, he does it to the ultimate, to the fullest. Move on, the world was in a complete way. But yet, this is part of the completeness of the world to do good for the creations, to give them a part in all of this. This itself is that timing that is one of the reasons that it went up in his blessed will that the creation should be for Yidden and for the Torah. Breishis B'Shvil, the Eibishter created the world that it should be for the Yidden and Torah so that they should make a difference. The fact that the Yid will be involved in the creation, making it a better place, that will give the Yid an opportunity to get the ultimate good because he brings in shleimus in the world. Al Yidei she Yisrael al Yidei avedosam yesifu shleimus ba'olam. Through the Yid, with service of the Yid with Torah, will add completeness to the world. What does it need to add completeness if the world is complete? Shleimus nailis yoser ma shleimus the olam k'moshu mitzad abriya, an elevated level of completeness, wholesomeness, more than the completeness and wholesomeness of the world as it's from creation. The Eibishter created, the Eibishter's kindness is to create that the Yid, through his avodah, will bring in additional wholesomeness. So that's the Eibishter's toy for a Yid to give him the opportunity to bring in shleimus. And since the wholesomeness of this service is when it's done with simcha, lochein al yidei ze mitoisef gam b'hashleimus da'olam. So when the Yid's avodah is complete because he's doing it with simcha, so this adds also gam b'hashleimus da'olam, adds wholesomeness in the world, shenasa le'avedis Yisrael, which it takes place through the service of a Yid. So the Rebbe just explained in this now that the point of shleimus of the Yid in this bracket, the Rebbe explained the whole idea that this shleimus that is by a Yid is negeya. It's important not only for the Yid, but this brings in shleimus of the world because the Yid is to serve the Eibishter. So this is important of simcha. Simcha is important for the avodah of the Yid, and simcha is important in order to accomplish, to impact the world in its completeness, to make it on the highest level. But it's more than that. That the completeness of this service is when it's with joy. So one can say, okay, I'm doing the avodah, but it's not in its complete, not also not in the biggest level, but I'm still doing the avodah. So Rebbe explains now, Elo, v'loiz u'bilvad, shlevek b'simcha l'shas simcha b'avodas Hashem. He gam hechrech b'avodas Hashem. It's actually a necessity in the service of Hashem. Shalochein, therefore, kasher choser hasimcha b'avodas Hashem. When there is lacking joy in the service of Hashem, magi al ze einish chas v'sholem, then you deserve a punishment for that. If it was just that you're not doing it be'avodah complete, okay, why would you get a punishment? But the Torah says, "Tachas k'meshe kosov, tachas shaloya vadeto Hashem lekecha b'simcha v'goyim." Because you didn't serve him b'simcha, that's why all the punishment comes. So we see it's not just to add shleimus, but there's actually punishment when you don't do b'simcha. Why? Ki inyan ha'avodah hu lahamshich gilui elokus lamata. Because the idea of the service is to bring down revelation of godliness below. And that becomes through simcha. So we need simcha. Simcha, without simcha, you're not doing the avodah basically, because without simcha, you're not revealing the godliness. And it's not only that it's not b'shleimus, but you're not doing your avodah. But the Rebbe says, how do we do simcha when we also have to do with awe, with yira? And here where it comes the paradox that we got to make sure that the simcha is a proper simcha. And that's why by Noach and by Chava didn't work, because just saying the simcha, we find there has to be the level of yiras Hashem. Simcha alone can lead to arrogance, can lead to negative things, but you have to have simcha b'bitl. Together, while we're saying you must be b'simcha, the pasuk also says, "Ivdu Hashem b'yira." You have to serve Hashem with awe. But even though it says with awe, in this pasuk itself, it says, "Vigilu bir oda." Rejoice with trembling. So there needs to be yira, but joy bir oda. Simcha. There needs to be simcha. How do we reconcile, make simcha with yira? Elo. So the difference is like this. If the simcha is with a sense of self, you feel it. Could be that would lead you to feeling your yeshus being an entity, being a yesh, feeling yourself to a sense of self. Then once you feel, once it becomes a sense of self, this can lead to many negative undesirables that branch out from a feeling of you, feeling of self, a sense of self. That's why you can't just leave it at simcha. It needs to be to serve Hashem with awe, with fear, and you rejoice with the trembling. That way, when it is with fear and bir'ada, that joy will be a real joy, but not a felt, an essence, self-centered joy. It'll be in a way of humility and self-effacement and humility. That's the way the simcha. To use the pasuk in the language of the pasuk, v'yasufu anovim ba'ashem simcha, that the humble, they will add joy to Hashem. The joy comes from the level of humility. That is the level that is required, that it should be in a level of bittul va'anova. Sha'asimcha hi biyachad, either the simcha is together, or because or because the humility and subjugation brings the simcha to the common sivav. Either it goes together, or the humility brings out the simcha, as the Rebbe will explain later on. Dalet. Now, based on this, the level that simcha needs to be with bittul in order to be the proper level of simcha. The Bal Yemai led is the Rebbe Rashab explains in this Mamer above. Inyan osos chava chulu osos sara chulu. What is it? Chava came sorgev shatzad hashova shabahem. What's the common denominator by them who sharot sulifel inyan hasimcha? They wished to accomplish the idea of simcha. K'may merazal, as the sages of blessed memory say, Gabei Chava. They say, Eshkol shel anovim sochato v'nos noloy. She, a cluster of grapes, she squeezed out and she gave it to him. So we see it has to do with grapes. Grapes is simcha. Wine brings misameach. Ubunoyach ksiv vayita kerem, that he planted an orchard, vayesh v'nayayin, he drank from the wine over there. So wine, if you just look at wine itself, is joy. The yayin uyina simcha. Yayin is idea of joy, as the pasuk says. Yayin ham samech elakim banoshim. The wine that rejoices, elakim banoshim, meaning that it makes Hashem and people happy. The avoid of yayin, avoid of simcha. Hello, shebchava hoisa simcha b'chinas murgash. By Chava, this joy was in a way that she felt. The Chava can see, because what does it say by Chava? It says, "Vatero isho kitoiva eitz leMichael v'chisavu." She looked at it. She says, "Oh, this tree is good for food, and it's desirable. It's a taiva." It felt the desire. She says, "Oh, you're not a gosher." I mean, the sense, a feeling of a sense. So she failed. V'noyach rotzo gave her husband. V'noyach rotzo l'takin es chet eitzadas, and Noach wanted to correct and fix this chet eitzadas, which came shu inyan hargosha, which is the idea of felt. Al the hargosha, through feeling. He got involved with the wine. V'le also biyodi. He also didn't succeed in correcting the mistake of Chava. The vayesh min hayayin hevi eisoy. What happened? What did it bring him when he drank from the wine? Loy lesimcha shebebchinas bittul, not to a joy which brings to self-effacement. Yayin hamsamech, wine that makes happy. Kim la vayishkor, it brought him to becoming drunk. Yayin hamshak. So it brought him to being drunk, not the wine that brings to simcha. He didn't correct what Chava did, but he failed himself also. It brought him to Yain HaMeshaker. Now, we have to caution here. The Rebbe, of course, there's a what, but when a person is shikar, he also loses his mind. If the idea is to lose yourself, lose your mitzias, so you become shikar, you lose your mind. But that's a confusion of mind. It's a whole different thing than becoming bittul. The Rebbe explains now. Although when a person is shikar, he lacks feeling. So that's not the same thing as not feeling the metzias. Over there, the lack of feeling, it's not because the humility and subjugation. That's just a confusion of your mind and your feeling, but it's not a sense of humility. So, therefore, what Noach tried to fix it through Hargosha was not successful. So what is the correction for the Chet Eitzadas, which is the sense of feeling Nasa de Sora Davke, that takes place through Sora. As explained in Kabbalah, that it was Sora Tikno mashakilkilo Chava, that Sora corrected that which that's what Chava ruined through the wine. The Sora, Bechinas Malchus. Sora is the level of Malchus. In the Kabbalah, Sora represents the level of Malchus of Atzilus. Shalochay Nikra Sora, Melosha Sorora. That's why she's called Sora, from the language of dominance, which is Malchus is dominance. But Malchus is dominance, but it's also Inyan Habitl, also the idea of Bitl. So Sora was dominance through Bitl, as the Rebbe will continue to explain, and also in the next Mamer in Tavshim Memhei, the Rebbe speaks longer about this as the combination of being Srora, but also the level of Bitl, Malchus, Lesl Mekamal Klum, and its dominance is from its Bitl. So that's why through Sora, through Bitl becomes the Tikkun. Simcha Sheb'Bechinas Bitl. It's a Simcha which comes in a level of humility, of self-effacement. So this is the meaning in the Zohar. Also Sora v'nochtos v'solkus. That Sora came about and she descended and then she went up. Shemitzad habitl shebemalchus. Because of that subjugation, the self-effacement of Malchus, the Sfiris HaMalchus. We're talking now in the Sfiris. Even when she goes down. From Malchus of Atzilus, she comes down to Biyah. So that descent is to elevate. Vesolka, she goes up. The Yeridas HaMalchus Lamata, when Malchus descends below, that is in order to sort out and to fix those sparks of holiness which are found below, and to elevate them above, descending into the level of Biyah, to elevate the sparks of Biyah. This we're talking about Sora, the way she's Sfiras HaMalchus. But also when you look in the story that Avram and Sarah went down to Egypt physically, literally, why it's the purpose of them going down? So in order, the elevation when they go up from Mitzrayim, Vayal Avram in Mitzrayim, him and his wife to go up from Mitzrayim, it should be in a way that Avram was heavy with all the cattle, the silver, and the gold. So he should be elevated. But this seems like Avram, no. Because everything that Avram got was because of Sarah. That represents the level of Sarah coming down, because it says Avram Heiti Bavura. This becomes through Sarah all of the great fortune that he gets going down. Avram, he did good, that he gave him all these things from Mitzrayim was because of Sarah. So it means that Sarah is the reason. That way Sarah got the higher level, the Chayin Elohim, which is even the higher Madreges, V'ad asher dilo havechayin, to the extent that that life became hers, shachayin hein dilo gam b'murgash, also in the sense that was her life, her essence, herself, her murgash was also the higher level. The liyos shamalchus he b'bchinas bitl be'atzem, since Malchus is bitl in essence, therefore even what's felt by her is a level of bitl. It becomes the law, becomes the level of bitl of the higher worlds, because something that is bitl be'etzem like Malchus, even the murgash is bitl. What does it interpret in the service of Hashem? talking about Simcha Shel Mitzvah, we're talking about serving the Eibishter, learning from Sora to be Mesakin, so that the Simcha should be without leading to negative things. The Gam Kisha Simcha, he is Galus, even when Simcha is revealed, it's still rejoicing, but it's in a way of humility. Similar to a king, even though he's in exalted states, in a joyful state, that the strength and joy in his place, it's not in the way of sense of self, but it's a sense of subjugation, even in the time when you feel the simcha. Therefore, from this simcha, in a noisef, besides the fact that it doesn't apply that this should lead to undesirable results, like was by Chava Noach, that it led to negative things. The contrary, this brings to the ultimate elevation. Brings us to the total elevation until it's a level that it's similar to the future to come, meaning the simcha brings us to the highest of levels that will only be in the future. What does it have to do with the future? We're talking about the Mamer explains about the law who have a chayin who dugmas v'nichya lefon of she'ilosin. With regards to the law, bayom mashmin shlishi yikimenu v'nichya lefonov, and we will live before him. Bayom shlishi means Beis Hamikdash shlishi, or the highest level, but which will all come in the future. This chayin, the law, is similar to lefonov. Chaim B'tachlis HaShleimus, the ultimate Chaim. So this level of Chaim B'tachlis HaShleimus is going to come Li'osid Lavai, and we are able to get this through that real Simcha Mitzvah, through that which was Nimshach, through the Avodah of Simcha Mitzvah, and this is all that Sara brought about in the world.